We'll just get the party started. Again, if you're just joining us, you're at the DevSecOps Maturity Model webinar. Thanks again for taking the time to be with us today. There's a lot of you here with us, and we're super excited to share with you kind of some of the work that we've been doing at Datadog, and also how that can kind of help you accelerate your DevSecOps efforts. And if you're new to DevSecOps, this is just going to be a good time for you to maybe understand how you could get involved with DevSecOps in your organization. And so I'm Andrew Krug. I'm a technical evangelist at Datadog, primarily specialize in the security products, cloud security portfolio, and identity stuff. And of course, today we are joined by two very special guests who I am going to let introduce themselves instead of me trying to read from a bio, because it's just much more fun. So Tanya, do you want to go ahead and go first?
Sure. I am a big nerd that is obsessed with the security of software. And I run a training company and I stream a lot and I run a community and I just really like security a lot and talk about it a lot, even sometimes in situations where it probably seems inappropriate. Like I'll go to the bank and be like, you need to turn on MFA. So that's me in a nutshell.
Security is a lifestyle. Love it. And then Don, do you want to go ahead and go next here?
Yeah, thank you. And also, I'm super excited to be here with this panel. Just a great group of people. I'm Don Libert. I've been in security for a while now, so I've done all the pen testing and all of the defensive end of this thing for a couple different companies. It is equally a hobby as it is a profession, so I never feel like I go to work. It's the greatest thing.
Yeah, so thanks again, both of you, for being here today. Especially like to kick this off on the panel. I think if anybody wants to follow up, if they have questions after the webinar, Tanya and Don are both super amazing people. And I think one of the myths that we tell ourselves in security is that you can't follow up with somebody that you see on camera and have them respond to you. And I can assure you, every single one of us is totally open to answering questions after the webinar if you have more questions. So consider us to be accessible. So let's talk about what we're kind of doing here today at Datadog, right? So we're here to talk about this DevSecOps maturity model. As you know, this thing that we call DevOps now is about 10 years old. And the goal of DevOps was always to facilitate better communication between developers and operations. And this has been interpreted a variety of ways, right? But the base idea is fundamentally a great idea, right? To effectively just put a bunch of people in the same room, create a culture of openness, process, and tooling that facilitates this kind of ongoing conversation between folks. And that's just kind of the foundational principle there, right? But as we've sort of gone forward with that, what we're seeing as we explode on cloud native technology, different cloud provider platforms, supply chain problems, is that complexity is increasing and the pace of innovation hasn't met that complexity and relative risk sort of surface area. And so that's where kind of adding a security overlay, as I like to think of it, adds that security dimension to DevOps itself. And overall, again, our goal here is really just to foster this culture of communication, collaboration that reduces the attack surface and catches things as early as possible, but also accepts that sometimes undesirable things do make it to production, and the way that we respond to that is just as important. Do either of you want to chime in here, Tanya or Don, with like just your thoughts on DevOps versus DevSecOps?
I feel like DevSecOps is what us AppSec people do in DevOps environments. I feel like it's because vendors like to use lots of words, and that's cool. But I feel like, DevOps is supposed to include security. That's what everyone says. And it should, I agree. But I feel like when we say DevSecOps, it's like those are the specific security efforts to make sure that the final awesome product all the DevOps folks are making is also secure. So when people are like, it's a DevSecOps product, I'm like, oh, it's an AppSec product that also works in a pipeline? Awesome. Yeah, you have a lot of cool stuff in there. But I also wish that the part where the development and the IT operations, like that purple, was a bit more purpley. But other than that, I think it's really good. I also love how it's kind of like a rainbow in general. It feels very positive. Most Venn diagrams are different shades of, you know, earth tones or grays. So this is excellent. Good on the color. Andrew's like, oh gosh, I'm not going to ask Tanya any more questions. Don?
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a blast with you. I can tell already. Uh, I really appreciate that. To me too. So I think when we're talking about DevSecOps, we see it sort of as an add-on at this point to DevOps. I think AppSec has been there for a while. It's about being AppSec and not being blocking. And at the end of the day, I think that's like the goal, to let us understand the risks that are actually in the pipeline at all points of the pipeline and make those risk acceptance decisions, as sometimes we are going to let lows and mediums, like these type of risks, into the application. We're going to let that get deployed. We know it's going to be a follow-up later on, but it's not worth stopping the development cycle for. I think one of the things that you really show well here is that it is about coming together, hence the Venn diagram. I think where DevOps was a little bit more about, can we get developers out there? Can we get them producing faster? DevSecOps is, yeah, can we do that and increase code quality?
Can I add to Don's answer? I like it. Good. Yeah, I agree with Don. Also, I feel like DevSecOps is us security folks, like Don was saying, like weaving ourselves through everyone else's practices. And sometimes that means putting a tool in the pipeline, and sometimes that means us realizing, yeah, this SAST tool, I want to run a complete scan. And if I put that in a pipeline, I'm not going to have friends anymore on the dev or ops teams. So I'm going to arrange it to run like every Friday night. And I'm going to look at those results myself, or have my team dig through them on Mondays and Tuesdays, and then like hand out bugs like candy, because I don't want to mess with their awesome, fast, efficient processes. Yeah, I agree with Don, but we knew that.
Yeah,
okay, we'll let you.
We're going to get to that culture aspect. I think that you just touched on right there, which is that the happiness of your engineers and your security folks and your IT folks and all the folks that are in all these teams is almost more important than all of the other categories. And I think that's going to come out kind of as we talk about how Datadog decided to break this down. But let's just kind of move forward here to this idea of like a DevSecOps life cycle, right? So you can see this kind of continuous diagram here on screen that shows how you have all these traditional SDLC phases, and then around the border, we also have kind of different security activities that should be occurring at different phases along this timeline. So that's just important to kind of keep in mind as we go through this, that it's really about embedding security in every phase of SDLC. It's not security early, it's not security pre-deployment, it's not security unit tests, it's not continuous auditing only, it's everything along the entire life cycle of software as we step through this. And so, of course, at Datadog, we have solutions that help with this. I think if you look at this diagram, you can see that we offer quite a variety of products that have helped traditionally in the DevOps space. In fact, like Tanya and I had a great tour of the Datadog product portfolio last week, just to kind of talk about our security story and how we're bringing security to the places where developers really already are. And I think that's something that's also near and dear to me. And it's also key to any good DevSecOps strategy is trying to surface as much useful information to folks in the places where they already are, rather than trying to come at it the other way around. And that's where Datadog's products kind of come in and help do that, right? So we have the continuous profiler with vulnerability information through partner integrations. We have this great alert pipeline, security monitoring, and now we also just went generally available with our continuous auditing, cloud security posture management, cloud security posture monitoring. Apologies, new names are hard sometimes. But we have all these things that can help out. And if you want to follow up with us, we're so happy to just talk with you about any of these things. So we've covered what DevSecOps is, like at a really high level, and kind of why it's important now. So let's talk about how to drive DevSecOps in your organization, right? So the tool that we've decided to employ in order to help you do that is a maturity model, right? And maturity model isn't a new concept. I think Martin Fowler has a great quote here. He's quoted in a lot of DevOps sort of material. But it's just it's a tool that you can use to measure your effectiveness against a matrix of scoring criteria. So over time, you can sort of look at this and you can say, where am I now? And then define where you need to stop or where you want to stop. And then you can see this clear checklist of things that you need to do in order to get there, right? So what we've done is used our opinions, using the things that we've learned from all of our experience just owning and operating Datadog, but also the chats that we have with all of you, like whether or not you're a customer of Datadog, we're constantly engaging with the community, learning about challenges, seeing where folks are really vulnerable, and we brought those opinions kind of to our own 4-step model here: beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert. If you look out there, you might also notice that there are actually other DevSecOps security models, right? This is designed to be far more rapid. So if you go and you look at something like the OWASP DSOM, their DevSecOps maturity model, it's a very exhaustive list of controls that's mapped to ISO 27001. We all know that ISO standards are great, but it's going to take you a lot longer to go through that. And if you're just trying to spend a short period of time and see if you want to just kind of dip a toe in the water of DevSecOps, our model is a really great place to start, right? Because it's going to provide you some really immediate feedback and really immediate value, and of course, can help direct you towards solutions that are going to help you close those gaps in your DevSecOps posture. As far as the model goes, we have just a few categories, right, across 6 major competency areas, and we define these inside, like these aren't borrowed from any other DevSecOps model, right? So it's people and culture, plan and develop, build and test, release and deploy, operate, observe, and respond. And I think these are really unique to our model. But one of the things that I want to call out from the last conversation is that people and culture cornerstone is there. And I don't always see this covered in every other risk assessment or survey or anything like that. And it's such an important piece of the puzzle, right? But we'll get to that when we start to read through the survey results. And if you read the white paper, you may have seen a matrix that looks a lot like this per category, where we sort of have different levels of maturity defined and the attributes of your organization within them, where you would either strongly agree or strongly disagree that those are attributes of the organization or the team that you're working in to deliver the products and software that you deliver as a company that, of course, provides your customers value and hopefully also brings them some joy. So again, like it's just category by category, competency by competency. So patch management, I know, is kind of a hot topic, near and dear to lots of us. We know that we should be doing it. Seemed like a no-brainer to kind of put in the matrix itself. But this is one I think every person on this call can probably identify with, what mature patch management looks like versus what immature patch management looks like. And so, of course, if you want more information on this, we have this DevSecOps white paper, which you can pull down, that has the sort of detailed granularly for each sort of broad category, and then the attributes that your organization should follow inside of that, and also practices you can kind of employ to get there. And then we have this assessment. So all of you were encouraged to take this very short survey. There, one of the attendees is asking, is there a link to share? And there absolutely will be several bit.lys coming up in subsequent slides, including just the one slide at the end with all the links that are shown. So it's that one conference slide that if you want to take a screenshot or whatever, you can do that right at the end. But we have this assessment. It's a 36 question assessment. It was sort of designed to take you 10 minutes or less. If it takes you more than 10 minutes, don't feel bad. Like, go and find the real answers, because maybe you don't have all the answers across your organization. But the assessment starts here on a page that looks a lot like this. And again, you just go through these categories and you either affirm or disagree with what the questionnaire is asking you. So there's a short link on the upcoming slide to this self-assessment. And the output of it looks a bit like this, right? So there's that link for the folks that were asking for it. It's just a bit.ly. It's going to take you straight to the assessment. You can fill it out now. It's going to give you this beautiful radar graph at the end, along with a little bit of prescriptive guidance on how you can sort of mature in each category. And again, what we've done is we've just distilled down that scale score ranking, and it's going to show you where you could use the most improvement, or maybe where you're the strongest, and you don't need to focus as much time. So you can kind of take a step back and just evaluate what it is that you're doing. Thanks for throwing the links in, everybody else. So I think radar charts are kind of useful for this, because this is a great thing to pass around the org or put in front of your team as just like a visual aid to even have a discussion around. Because again, like, communication is kind of one of the most important tenets of this, and this is just a tool that facilitates more conversation and more planning. So before we get to the survey part, based on that big long readout I just did, do either of you have anything you want to add here to what I just said, or feel free to vehemently disagree with my framing for DevSecOps?
I would actually say probably one of the things that I think we're planning to do is maturity models in and of themselves tend to get stagnant when they are unmaintained. The point is that eventually this should be updated as well, as the industry is going to change. It is going to grow. It's going to modify in ways that nobody sees. So what might be, say, an intermediate or advanced today might actually be down a level in the next 2 years, just due to the nature of what's going on. I'm a big fan of the book, The Infinite Game. I think when you get into things like DevSecOps, you get into security, it is an infinite journey. It's as much time as you are able to put into it. That doesn't mean you have to make your way all the way to expert. It means that decide really what we're hoping the tool will help you decide where you're at and if you want to grow capabilities in other areas. Not that everybody should be aiming to be an expert in every single area.
I feel like this stuff is probably, so I would love to work at an org that has that much blue going on. I do like a lot of consulting, and I find a lot of the conversations I have around DevSecOps and or migrating to the cloud is all around, well, I saw this company at this conference and they said they migrated to the cloud in 6 months. And I saw Netflix speak at a conference, and they do these 27,000 amazing things around AppSec, and we feel like a bunch of losers and we're not doing a good enough job. And so I just want everyone that's watching, when you see this image, your image might not be perfectly filled out, and it's okay. You're not a failure. You're just on your way. Right? And like a lot of the places that I've seen where they fill one of these out and then it doesn't look very good and then they feel really bad. Please don't feel bad if you fill out your self-assessment and you're not doing that good. It's okay, because it's a tool to see where you're going to go to. It's not admonishment, if that makes sense. And so I just wanted to say that because I spend a lot of time on consulting calls explaining, like, I know that you saw like some company that did this amazing, like basically magic trick of awesome, but you don't have to have a perfect thing. It's okay. We're all on a journey and we don't start out perfect. We start at the beginning. Sorry to get like all mama bear on everyone. It's like the most common question is like, do we suck? I'm like, no, you're trying really hard. You're working on it, and we're going to make a plan together, and you are going to get there. And I know Don and Andrew also feel you can get there.
Yeah, I think that's a really great call out, which is that these things are hard to do and they take a long time to do. And I think one of the traps that we fall into is often just kind of this nihilism of I'm things are so bad I could never get even to step one. But really, the fact that you're taking an assessment like this at all is step one. To just try
Yes,
and understand.
yes.
So there's kind of already progress, and attending events like this, it's about incremental progress and not just going from one side of the spectrum to the other in any particular category overnight.
There's a question in the chat that I thought maybe we would want to answer. Speaking of OWASP SAM versus this model, will there be conflicts? I'm not answering. Mm-mm.
I honestly don't think that there are conflicts with it because I think that we align actually pretty well with most of OWASP's guidance in this. If anything, I would say that the OWASP set of controls are perhaps a fair bit more prescriptive and apply a little less broadly to some categories of application. But that's just kind of my 2 cents, having read both models for quite some time.
I would say the OWASP SAM is probably more comprehensive as it tries to tackle the entire space of your security maturity, where our model is a little bit more tailored to just DevSecOps, a little bit more to that continuous security model and how do you get it into the AppSec pipelines.
Cool.
So
Cool. Good answer.
yeah, just diving right into it here. Let's get into some of the early survey data, right? So notably, it's very early days for the survey data, but since we kind of started this campaign a few weeks back, we had thankfully 94 total responses, which I actually think is a great batch of respondents, far more than many InfoSec surveys I've seen come out and get engagement within the first month. So 94 is a really good number. Just to talk a little bit about the demographics and kind of the hats that people are wearing that are taking these surveys, you can see from kind of looking at the sector and the company size here, most of the survey respondents are in either technology or financial services, with other weirdly being the third highest category, but perhaps not statistically significant. And then in terms of employee size, we're kind of sitting mostly around that 1,000 to 5,000 employee range. With 5,000 plus being the runner-up for folks that took the survey. So super interested to kind of dive in to a little bit of this and maybe spend a minute noodling on why such a strong showing from financial services. I would have expected technology companies, right? But financial services is the clear second place. I'm wondering if there's maybe is that because of compliance? Is compliance driving this? That the interest in this kind of an activity, or what do you both think?
Okay, so I think it's obvious why the sector is technology that people answered it the most, because technologists are the people that follow technology companies, and that's what we both run. So that makes sense. There would be a lot more of them. Company size, someone with under 100 employees might not be doing DevSecOps. Like, we have 5 employees at We Hack Purple. We don't make software. We don't need to. We buy COTS products, right? And so you need to have like a big enough company just in order to make software. Does that make sense? So then if you're not making software, you're not really doing DevSecOps. So these are my theories. Don?
And to me too, when we're looking, I'm kind of, when I see financial services move their way up there, in that number 2 spot, it's really, there's a lot of fintech now. That whole industry is moving to be technology focused. So they're doing what they've always done. The one I'm actually most surprised about and kind of thrilled about is the industrials and manufacturing. That is like such a cool area to actually start seeing interest into this space. I know. So weird history lesson. I used to make golf tees in a factory. That was kind of one of my first jobs uh, while I was in college, and the amount of technology and the amount of measurements that they could be getting use out of in building that stack, even back then, it was pretty incredible. And so I'm really thrilled to actually see that space. As I absolutely remember coming into work and literally the computer that they used to scan in the wood uh, was compromised because somebody like downloaded something. And so, if they're looking at, not only how do they produce and push out their code, and how do they move that forward, that's pretty exciting to me.
Yeah.
And I know if anybody here who's ever worked in manufacturing knows sometimes those proprietary systems, that are like a scanner or a CNC router, or they come with these computers that have either licensing set up or an operating system. Perhaps you can't upgrade, so they become an instant risk almost out of box. So it's nice to see that kind of interest from that space. I predict eventually, and this is like a little bit of a tangent, that K3S in manufacturing is just going to be crazy, and we're going to be able to apply so much security learnings from cloud native to the manufacturing pipeline, but that's like another panel. So we have kind of some demographic breakdown. And who is it? Who is it that's taking the survey, right? We saw a really strong showing, of course, from engineers, with managers as kind of a runner up there, and then mostly SREs and developers actually are the survey respondents themselves. And again, this is team identification and not necessarily what's your primary role, but what team are you in. So I don't know if this skews the survey data a little bit or not, because SREs are going to have a really intimate knowledge probably of what's going on. So it could be a little biased one way or another. But no surprises there, I think, in terms of the respondent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you called it DevSecOps, so I kind of thought that all. Did anyone respond and say they were in marketing? Because isn't that like the best marketing word ever? Like, besides blockchain, right?
Yeah, I think that would probably fall in the other category, and I could have broken out that 13% at the bottom to see what the distribution of other titles were. But yeah, there's
I'm just.
no surprise titles, I guess, or no surprise teams.
No, that's good. I, I think it's also really good to have a mix because if only security people answered, you wouldn't have like a really good cross section of opinions, right? We don't want one opinion. We want everyone's opinion. And we really want the dev opinion, the sec opinion, and the ops opinion. And it looks like you got it.
Yeah, and just having that visibility, I think, is part of driving a really good conversation, right? Because all the tools in the world, they don't know what a software engineer that's been around a long time and are actually architected something that they know more about that risk, like the relative risk in their own apps sometimes, than we can scan for or audit for. Sometimes it's the other way around, but I like to be optimistic. So let's
Cool.
talk about, on optimism, what were folks doing really, really well here in the survey. And I think that there was some surprises here for me as I went through and analyzed the data. I was like, wow, there's like a moment here that I'm having where maybe I was a little bit pessimistic about engineering culture and like what's going on across respondents. So the first thing that came out as like the almost number one equivocally answered yes question was, team members are able to discuss burnout and empowered to take mitigation measures. And you can see that we hit just over 75% of respondents said, yes, this is something I think I know I can do at my company.
That's impressive.
Especially right now, I feel like as parts of the world are opening up after COVID, burnout is at an all-time high, as everybody has essentially been at home and worked in our sectors so just constantly is why would you take vacation? There was literally nowhere you could go. You were stuck in your house. So the fact
Yeah.
that we're actually like, yes, no, burnout's a thing and everybody's trying to get through this. It makes me a little happier that maybe the workforce is moving in a more positive direction as a whole.
Yeah, I also feel like maybe because it's been such a big thing since the pandemic that people are more comfortable discussing it. But I have to say, like, I've suffered burnout quite a few times in my long career. And I feel like previously you couldn't talk about it at all. Like, I remember having to take a few weeks off from burnout, and literally my manager had locked me in the office. Like, this was over a decade ago, so I could not leave because they were like, so, like, you have to finish these tasks or the world is ending, blah, blah, blah. And, like, then I took a few weeks off, and they were just, it was not good. They're like, the manager sent an email to everyone and said, "You're stressing Tanya out, and she has to take leave now, and it's everyone else's fault except her fault, obviously." And I quit, surprise. But like, that wasn't a thing people could talk about then. Everyone's like, "Tanya went on crazy leave." I'm like, "No, you're making me crazy. You like locked me in the office for a day when I was trying to go home. Like, that's not okay, guys." And they're just like, it didn't. And yes, it was the Department of Justice where I was locked in the building, of all places. But like, you can talk about it now. You can say to your manager, like, "I'm having mental health stuff." And it's like an actual thing that you can talk about now. And you could not talk about it before. You could not. So I think that even though the pandemic has, like, obviously tons and tons and tons of awful bad things that happened, like millions of deaths, I feel like a really good thing that has come of it is that people are having a lot more honest discussions about mental health and about like taking breaks. And like, you don't need to have your Slack open until like 10 p.m. Sorry to get super personal and heavy. You're like looking very serious, Don. I'm okay. Just to be clear, that was like a decade ago. That was
Yeah,
like,
no, I'm actually thinking about it too. That I agree with you. I've absolutely spent way too. I've spent nights in data centers, and that was always like these interesting experiences. Uh, but even thinking about it now, we've basically gotten to this point where we're inviting people into our homes a little bit more, whereas before it used to be that we were in the workplace. And so when I
yeah.
start seeing this information, to me, this could mean multiple things. Like people are able to discuss it. Hopefully, they're able to take time off, and that honestly will probably improve the workspace and the work that we do. So there will be like less issues making their way out there because we're going to be a little bit more in tune with what we need and be healthy enough to actually produce it.
Yeah. So, good question.
Yeah, I think that the fact that so many people are responding positively to this question also probably indicates that there's other positive attributes of that workplace culture, and our respondents actually have a really strong people culture when it comes to engineering, at least in this sample set. But we'll
Cool.
see a little bit some more attributes of that, I think, as we go through. The next data point was just we asked a question on do you strongly believe that you spend more time on building features versus going back and bug fixing? Which ideally, we all want to be in business to make software. We want to deliver features for our customers. And most people were on that agree or strongly agree side of the line. And I don't actually know, without correlating some more data, whether this is a positive attribute, like whether they're just not going back and fixing bugs, or whether we have a lot of companies who are actually to the point where they're catching things so early that they don't have bugs that don't make it to production that they have to circle back and fix instead of delivering features.
I don't feel like this is a surprise. Like, it's kind of your job to make cool stuff when you're a software developer. I've always viewed like bugs are operations. So I have to fix bugs. If something's broken and my app's not up, like that comes first always, operations. And then it's like, but then I get to do cool features.
And I
Dawn?
kind of like your point there. Is it the correlation? It'd be interesting to see just across the aspects, like who answered this? Like, was this primarily the engineers, or was it, we saw some managers, we saw some directors in there. So I'm curious what the difference is, as I'm sure somebody, people are pushing for features. And at the same time, the bugs, they're always going to be there. When we look at, code quality, we're pushed to go really fast. And when you go really fast and you meet the customer's needs, it's always going to creep in. So it could also be like that healthy level of technical debt. I think that would be interesting to dig into.
Yeah, we did have a good tech debt question as well that I didn't correlate with this, but that would be an interesting bit of data to pick at. And of course, a distribution by role, I think, would also be a good set of data. Once we have more responses, there'll be a pretty good opportunity to go through and do some deeper dives here on this that I hope will culminate in a report. So we'll kind of see how that evolves as we get more survey responses. Of course, this is the next non-surprise thing, right? We asked pull requests made it to production branches are always subject to automated tests and approval or review. Most people saying, of course, we do this. So if you look at the agree and up part of the curve, it's pretty much, this isn't something we need to champion anymore as an always must do, because folks seem to be doing it on the large.
Well, I don't know. 30% say they're not doing anything. I don't know. I'm really surprised that something could make it to production without, maybe they work in a place where there's manual tests.
Yeah, who are these? Well, yeah, the question's a little gating, right? Because it says subject to automated tests and approval review. So I would probably break this apart if I had to go back in time.
Someone's asking, sorry, very quickly, will it be possible to get a copy of the slides when this is done?
Yeah, I believe that they'll send out the slides after the webinar.
Perfect. Awesome sauce. And there's going to be a recording available too, right? Because these are always everyone wants to know, Andrew. We do. We want to know.
We have a lot of folks in different time zones that likely can't be here with us. So of course we get the recording out as quick as we can.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on tests and pull request reviews?
Not everyone uses pull requests. There's still places where, they just kind of shove the code in. And I hope that there's tests happening, but I would say there's way more places not using any sort of pipeline software than ones that are. There's still so many legacy shops, or they have 20 teams and one team has a pipeline or two teams have a pipeline. I feel like I'm not sure how those people would be able to answer this question. Does that make sense? They'll be like, oh, but my manager does approve it.
Pull requests are also very Git flow too, right? So if you're using Mercurial or CVS or Team Foundation Server, any of those other sort of version control systems that are out there, the facilities are quite different. I can tell you.
Or if you're really, really sad and you're using source safe, it's going to be okay. You're like, it's not going to be okay.
that one's always tough. And what I'm curious about too is how does this correlate with the fintech or with technology? Is what stage of the company too? That would be interesting. A startup with 6 people might not be doing approvals, but I would assume, and maybe this is incorrect, but a lot of the fintech, due to the compliance regulations, they're going to go through some level of approval process. They might actually still have entire suites of quality assurance, which is, depending upon the company and what their history is how they're going to function a little differently.
Yeah.
This brings us to, I think, what is our final positive result from the survey, which is blameless postmortems and retrospectives. So 77% of folks identified that they at least agree that their company does do a blameless postmortem or retrospective in the event that there is an incident or security incident. And that was also higher, much higher than I thought it would be.
in a good way.
in a good way.
Yeah. This is wonderful to see.
I'm actually kind of interested about what is strongly agree versus agree to that one. Like, is it mostly blameless if you agree, and then if you strongly agree? I know that like in some companies I've been at, the best ones I have seen have not included people's names in the postmortems, and in some of the origins, like that was part of it. They were like, okay, this person did this work at that time, and that's why it went out, which I feel is almost like an anti-pattern at this point.
Yeah, I think we have a very good internal postmortem process at Datadog that very much is aligned with that. And I do read the postmortems as they come out, and they're really interesting engineering reads, just in general. But I always learn something from them, and I think that's what's really cool about the entire exercise and the fact that we share them so broadly.
Yeah, I also think that hopefully, or a thing I like to do because I'm a data nerd is I like to take the results of lots of postmortems and kind of mash that data together, try to find patterns. Like, we didn't have access to tools a couple times, so let's fix that. Or, this team didn't know what to do and they were confused and they were like not following the process. Why weren't they following the process? Maybe we should give some training. I feel like when you see one thing happen one time in an incident, you might fix it if it's very serious. But if you see like little things happen repeatedly, it's like, you know what? Let's clean that up and see if it could just make our incidents go a lot better and smoother in the future.
And I think, from the security angle too, I think those postmortems are super important to be blameless as well. So it's good to see that on here. I mean, bad things happen. Bad things happen no matter how much money you put into it. It's not a question of will you be breached. It will happen at some point. Like there will be an incursion. Something will happen. Treating those just as blameless and trying to figure out how do you change your model? How do you apply it to not just the attack venue that they used, but also to the culture of the company. Sometimes it's fine to know that you're gonna change culturally what you do, as opposed to slotting slotting a piece of technology in there.
That's a good point. And it's also just good hygiene, right? To ensure that as much of the process kind of mirrors the ideals of the engineering organization, because the last thing that you want is for one of those documents to get leaked with names in it. I've heard some really unfortunate stories about folks whose names ended up in docs for public-facing sort of security incidents, and then they end up getting
Oh
docked.
my,
Or so this is just a good practice, I think, all the way around.
oh my God, that's awful. That would be so bad. Yeah, okay.
But it's
That
on the
would just,
we're trending in the right
sorry.
direction, right? And I
Yes,
think that's
I
that's
agree.
the way here. So starting with what next is the what could use improvement category. So I thought it was fun to just go and actually look at the entire aggregate of respondents and see what was the area that they seemed to need the most help in, right? And so I produced the same radar graph for the people plan, build, observe, operate, release quadrant here. And actually, the weakest area that was identified from these survey questions was actually planning. So planning
Hmm.
seemed to be the most efficient, with the two runner-up categories being observe and operate.
I am surprised by that. Because don't you have to plan a lot to actually get the other things done and do a good job?
So it's no surprise to me that if planning is lacking across the cohort, that there are other sort of deficiencies in the way that the software development lifecycle is working. Because like without planning, you can't have the pillars that you need for observe and operate, or even
Mm.
to some degree. But release was strong when observe and operate were kind of trending down.
Do we feel like there might be an angle here where the lack of planning is because of the agile model itself? Like, are they engaged in the agile model, and so people feel like, you know, they're only getting that 2 weeks, for example, sprint if they're following Scrum to actually plan, and so it doesn't take the bigger picture into view.
Maybe.
It could be. A lot of the planning questions that we asked were sort of around like your maturity for elasticity and how do you plan growth in your organization? How do you triage and prioritize features? It was meant to pick at that kind of stuff. So I don't know if it would necessarily be correlated with Agile or like a perception of how effective Agile is, but it's an interesting question to ask.
Also, Andrew, if you think about it, so like often a lot of the people that do the planning are the managers or the project managers or maybe the tech lead. But if you have a person that's like an intermediate or junior software developer, they're like, oh yeah, I don't do that much planning as part of my job. But maybe there's actually a crap ton of awesome planning happening, but they're not a part of it, so they don't realize it's happening.
Yeah, could be. But I thought this was an interesting stack up, at least for the data set. When I started to pick at this a little bit more, I was like, okay, well, what is the planning question that people answered the least, or at least disagreed with or strongly disagreed with the most? And that was actually around metrics with regard especially to security. So only 36% of people were able to identify that their organization had defined security metrics that were visible to everyone across teams.
I agree with this. I've seen so many places where they hide all the security metrics and the security data because they're super afraid. Well, someone will take that data and then they'll attack us. So we have to hide the security bugs and we have to hide this and hide that and secrets. And then guess what? Devs don't fix bugs that aren't in the bug tracker.
Yep. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
Right on.
this is one of the areas that's near and dear to us, right? As like a metrics platform. And I think one of the things that we actually do really well at Datadog internally and not just as a product, but metrics really are a driver for that planning conversation. So if I'm seeing that gap in the chart and then I'm seeing strongly disagree on this question, that's a pretty strong correlation.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really not surprised to see this. This is what I would consider almost like sometimes it's just traditional security behavior, and we started off very much in the back corner in keeping our metrics to ourselves. I think that realm has really changed over the last 10 years as we've done things like merge dev and ops, as we've merged like dev and security. Securities are a program the same way that features are a program, and getting those metrics out and in front of the rest of the company, it drives some of those transparency trainings. I know that at previous companies, uh, at first the security program was so tight and controlled. Everybody felt like if they went to the wrong website, somebody was going to drop out of the ceiling and they were going to get yelled at. So it's definitely a different world than what it is today. So it's interesting to see this and see that maybe some of that residue actually still exists, where security is not showing that they are beneficial to the company, that they're integrated, that they're weaved into the daily operations, and they're not inhibiting, they're helping.
Yeah, there's still lots of security people out there that have sort of, I want to call it the old attitude of, you must jump through my hoops or you cannot go to prod and you must prove yourself to me and dance around like a monkey how I see fit or I shall block you, as opposed to the new security type of attitude of, okay, so they're going to be releasing software and I better figure out how I can help them make it secure so that it's not a disaster later. So let's run alongside. Let's see if I can meet them at the beginning, see them again at the end. Like, let's see what I can do around what the ops and dev people are doing. So at the end, our product is safe. Yeah. Attitudes are changing.
For the better, I would say. Let's just chug along here. We're running a little short on time, and I want to make sure that we leave some open Q&A at the end of the session. but this was one that wasn't a surprise to me, is the number of respondents running chaos experiments regularly. We didn't specifically gate this to security chaos experiments, but this is an artifact of the survey, that this just isn't a level of maturity a lot of places are at.
I'm shocked there's that many people doing anything. That's
I
awesome.
yeah. The next one is a little bit more interesting. This is actually higher than I thought it would be, but could still use improvement, which is the number of folks who are using SaaS, DAS, or tools that generate software bill of materials. So either they're doing some kind of composition analysis or static analysis tooling of some kind. And this, I used to consider this to be really advanced, right? But over half of our respondents said, yeah, we're doing it.
Yeah. I dream of the day where it's 100, but I remember when I was a dev, it wasn't until like maybe 2013 that someone scanned my code with a DAS scanner. As yeah. And then from there on, it wasn't often. It was like, we have enough money to hire a pen tester to test 2 of our 24 apps. Pick. I'm like, oh crap. So am I surprised by this number? No. Do I like this number? No. Don?
Yeah, I really, so when I see that, it's really difficult too. They have a really bad history, like when SAST and DAST were really just getting started, where they're like, okay, here's 13,000 false positives. Please, dear dev, go take care of this. Which
for the rest of your life.
yeah, like you just have a mountain of tech debt. I think now they're a little bit better. I think chasing down even kind of back to it all the way down to each of the lows and mediums is even kind of counterintuitive at this point. They've got to be validated. I'm pretty honestly still seeing SAST and DAST up there. I'm kind of thrilled. I keep hoping for that next evolution in that environment. I think we're just getting there.
Yeah, it's just on the cusp of it, right? Because you want to observe it in CI, and then you want to know that it's actually a real thing by kind of doing some hybrid analysis of the app actually running itself. And I think we're right on the cusp of that.
Yeah.
Maybe you could update this question like next year when you do this to say, do you perform static, dynamic, or any sort of code or application analysis specifically to prevent insecure code or or vulnerabilities within the running application? So that would include IAST. It could include manual code reviews. It could include like searching for anti-patterns. So like, let's say you have a really strict secure coding standard where you work and then you just grep through the code for things that you know are bad. Because I've done lots of that crap where it's like, I don't have money for a security tool, but I know if you're doing input, there better be some validation. So I just like go grep through things, or everyone must be using stored procedures. So I'd look for like direct calls to the database type. I know I'm just gonna like look through the whole thing and then go have discussions, right? And so maybe it's like, do you have any sort of automated security tool that looks for vulnerabilities within applications, like kind of rounding it out? Does that make sense? Oh my gosh, Control plus F, password equals. Yes, exactly. That is a bad pattern.
Yeah. So that's a great point, doing the regex analysis, but like really this should be encompassing of any kind of code scanning mechanism.
Yeah.
And yeah, always open to feedback on the questions if anybody else has feedback. There were a couple of oddities, I think, that came out of the report that are interesting to discuss, which one of the things that I was wondering is do the companies that have mature DevOps have inherently high security scores as well? And so I just went and dumped out kind of a line graph side by side of where folks scored on the pure security questions versus the DevOps questions. And the result was kind of all over the place. And so the orange, if you can't see it because it's teeny tiny, is DevOps, and the blue is security. So where security is really, really low and the orange is really, really high is the model where you have very mature DevOps but not very mature security. And then some companies actually have much better security scores on the questionnaire versus their DevOps posture, which is also really, really interesting. So you could almost go through this and circle opportunities for folks to kind of just do very little and get to their happy place.
I actually think that's a really neat chart. And it looks like it sort of follows, sort of.
Sort
Like
of.
it's not all opposite. I personally feel like it would be really hard to do security really, really well if you're not doing IT well. And I feel like DevOps is the way to make kick-ass software. So
Yeah. And once we have more data, we can kind of do like a scatter plot kind of thing and do a little bit more correlation on this to kind of do some clustering. But with the limited data set, this is the best I could bang out in Python, pandas, and matplotlib in a short period of time. But this was fun to produce. And then the other surprise, I think, was adoption of continuous auditing. I expected this to be higher as well. So given how popular this concept is of posture management and the number of continuous audit tools that are available, this seemed low to me relative to cloud native kind of audiences.
I guess that this question really depends on what they consider continuous auditing. So, like, if you're in Azure, you can set an Azure policy and it constantly tells you that person's breaking policy, right?
Yeah.
And do you consider that continuous auditing? Because if so, then awesome. But I'm not sure if everyone is super familiar with the idea of continuous auditing. So like, you might end up with wonky answers, not because your question's not awesome, but because like what continuous auditing means might mean different things to different people.
Yeah. So
Yeah, be
we do need to wrap here shortly just to be respectful of everybody's time. But go ahead, Don.
Oh, I was just going to say, this one, I love Tanya's comments on this one. And the thing I wonder too is like, how much of this are we thinking continuous auditing is also continuous artifact collection? So I think that's kind of almost like an evolution of where we're headed as well.
So with that, we have to say goodbye to Tanya because she has another appointment to make.
So sorry, I do. I didn't scheduling. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. And she's gone, just like that. But thanks again to everybody for being here with us today. Here are the resources as promised. Please go check out the blog, check out the white paper, fill out that self-assessment. If you haven't filled out the self-assessment, we'd love to do some more analysis on this data. We can't do it without you, your data, and of course your feedback. So if you have any questions, any follow-ups from myself, Don, or Tanya, please do feel free to reach out to us directly. We'll be in touch. Any closing thoughts, Don?
Yeah, this was great. Thanks a lot for everybody just sharing that data out. That's incredibly useful. I think it gives us everybody just an idea of where everyone is on in this journey, and I'm sure we'll be answering these questions and getting them out to everybody as well.
All right, again, attendees, thanks so much. We don't have any time for questions right now, but we're going to make sure to get them answered. We'll get back to you when we send out the webinar brief. So thanks so much. Once again, I'm Andrew Krug, and this was Don LeBaire and Tanya from We Hack Purple. So thanks again for being with us.